The day my daughter betrayed my heart, I stopped believing in love. But it all started long before that, with silence, fear, and decisions I never wanted to make. My name is Margaret. I'm 75 years old. I've lived through more winters than I care to count in small-town Ohio. I've buried those I loved, lived with a broken heart for years, and nobody noticed. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what happened in my own home. The story I'm about to tell isn't pretty. There are no flowers, no fairy tale ending. There's snow, silence, tears soaked into pillows, and decisions that cost me everything. But it's real, and I have to. It all began in Millbrook, Ohio, a town where windows are always fogged up. Conversations end mid-sentence because everyone knows how they'll finish. People say hello with downcast eyes, carrying grocery bags and secrets in their hearts. Robert was my husband, tall, silent, one of those men who spoke with his eyes. When he first looked at me, I still believed love was destiny. He brought me dried wild flowers from the fields and said I had strong woman's hands. I thought it was poetry. Now I know it was the first rope tightening around my neck. We married young. I was 17. I entered that house with hope and left years later with scars nobody could see but were heavy to carry. Robert never raised his hand to me, but the way he treated me hurt more than any blow. He spoke to me like I was a mistake he was forced to endure, and I tried to be perfect. Did everything for him, but it was never enough. We had a daughter, Sarah. She was my light, my reason to endure. For her I smiled when my soul screamed in pain. But children feel everything. Children see everything. Sarah grew up watching her mother turn into a shadow. She never told me, but in her eyes were questions I couldn't answer. I remember one evening particularly clearly. Winter was harsh. We were almost out of firewood. Robert came home from the factory, threw his boots by the door, and looked at me the way he always did. I trembled, not from cold, but from fear. Fear of being inadequate again. He locked himself in the bedroom while I stayed in the kitchen, pretending to cook dinner. Sarah, she was 12 then, sat beside me quietly. After a few minutes, she said softly, "Mom, why don't you speak up when he talks to you like that?" I didn't know what to answer because I didn't know myself. It was fear, habit, cowardice, I don't know. I only know that in that moment I felt ashamed, a burning shame in my chest. But I kept going because it was easier to pretend everything was normal than face the truth. Until one day, Robert looked at Sarah differently. And in that look, I understood. This can't continue. This was the beginning of the end and the birth of my courage. After that evening, I could no longer look at Robert the same way. Something inside me broke. I continued cooking his meals, washing his clothes, saying, "Good morning," but it was all like acting. I lived in a play where my role was to be a shadow, and I played it too well. Sarah became more withdrawn. She grew quiet, as if afraid to make any sound. Her eyes became adult before their time. We barely talked. I saw how she looked at me with questions, but I turned away because I couldn't give her an answer that wouldn't hurt even more. Robert started coming home later and later, sometimes drunk, but even sober he was cruel. His words were like ice on skin. "Look at yourself. Who else would put up with you?" he'd say, without looking me in the eyes. And I stayed silent because I was used to staying silent. Sometimes I stood at the window at night, looking at the snow-covered streets of Millbrook, dreaming of how simple it would be to disappear, to vanish without a trace. But every morning I made oatmeal again, folded towels again, put on a smile like an old shawl, because I had no right to give up. I was a mother, and mothers are supposed to endure. That's what they told me. But endurance isn't strength when it's born from fear. It's a chain I put on myself. and every day it tightened. One evening I saw Sarah cover her ears with a pillow to avoid hearing him yell at me. I went into her room, sat beside her, and she asked, "Mom, why don't you leave him? Can't we live alone?" I looked at her and felt my heart squeeze. Leave? Where to? We had no money, no support, not one close person in this town. I was afraid. But in that moment I understood I couldn't be afraid anymore. The next morning I started, hiding small amounts of money I earned doing laundry and mending clothes for neighbors. Small bills in an old cookie tin. Nobody knew, not even Sarah. I didn't know how long my escape would take. I didn't know exactly how we'd do it, but I knew if I didn't save us now, tomorrow might be too late. Every night I prayed, not for myself, but for her, that she wouldn't become like me. That night I barely slept. I lay staring at the ceiling, listening to the kitchen clock tick, thinking, if not now, when? If not me, who? Robert came home late again, walked in like everything around belonged only to him. Took off his jacket, threw his boots in the corner, walked past me without even looking. I pressed my lips together. No words, no hello, no glance, just icy air between us. Sarah was already in bed, but I knew she wasn't sleeping. She always waited until he went to bed, because then there was at least some quiet. I stood at the window, snow glowing under the streetlight outside. We had only one chance, one attempt to escape and never look back, and I felt it was close. The next day, when Robert left early for his shift at the warehouse, I went to my neighbor Dolores. She was older than me, a widow, and one of the few who knew how to listen. I didn't tell her everything, only said I needed to leave urgently and couldn't explain why. She nodded silently, gave me an old suitcase and packed me a thermos of coffee and sandwiches for the journey. All that week I hid things, little by little, one item at a time. Socks, documents, a few photos, a bar of soap, a spare sweater for Sarah. The money was hidden under a floorboard, under an old rug in the closet. That evening, when Robert went to bed early, tired, with a bottle in his hands, I went into Sarah's room. She was sitting on the bed looking at me as if she'd been waiting. I sat beside her. "We're leaving," I whispered. "Tonight, now." Her eyes widened. "Where? How?" "Chicago. I have some money. We'll take the first bus." She didn't answer, just hugged me tight. And in that embrace there was no fear, only hope, small, trembling, but real. We left the house at 3 a.m. Outside was a blizzard, snow whipping our faces, fingers instantly numb. The suitcase squeaked on the ice and my heart pounded so loud it seemed the whole town would hear it. I looked back and saw how the windows of Robert's house darkened behind the snow veil. At the station it was empty, only the night clerk sleeping, wrapped in a scarf. We bought 2 tickets to Chicago. The bus left at 5 a.m. I sat holding Sarah's hand tightly. She was quiet, not crying, but her eyes were full of tears. "Mom, what? If he finds us?" I looked at her and for the first time in a long time said what I wanted to believe. He won't find us. I won't let him. The bus came. The doors hissed open. We got on, found seats, covered ourselves with scarves and coats, pressed against each other. When the bus started moving, I felt a tear roll down my cheek. Not from fear, not from pain, from freedom. The first small drop of freedom in decades. I didn't know what awaited us. I didn't know how we'd survive in Chicago. But I knew one thing. There was no going back. Never again. Chicago greeted us with indifference, noise, cold, the smell of exhaust, and wet coats, and crowds that don't look each other in the eyes. Where small-town sympathy ends, urban rush begins. And we, 2 small-town souls, got lost among those stone streets and soot-covered buildings like 2 snowflakes in a storm. We had nobody, no relatives, no friends, Only a suitcase, Sarah's child-sized jacket, $800 and a feeling of panic that wouldn't leave me for a minute. The first days we lived in a cheap shelter near the bus station. It smelled of mold, old tobacco, and hopes that had long died. 6 women slept in one room. Someone snored, someone prayed, someone stared at the ceiling like me. During the day, I walked the streets looking for work, knocked on every door. Factories, bakeries, laundromats. Everywhere I heard the same thing. No experience, no local address, no openings. Sometimes just sorry. On the 4th day, I got lucky. I went into a tailor shop where a woman named Rose, about 60, looked at my cracked hands and said, "Can you sew?" I nodded. "You'll be doing alterations. Pay isn't much, but you can live on it." That's how my new life began. My hands hurt, my back ached, my eyes watered from strain, but I didn't complain because I now had a goal. Never return to that house, to that past. Sarah sat alone in the shelter all day. I left her a piece of bread, a thermos of hot water, and went to work. When I came back, she was quiet. No questions, no tears, just silence. I tried to talk to her. "How are you? Everything okay?" She shrugged. "Fine." But I knew she hadn't forgiven me or life. She was angry and had every right to be. After a month, we got a room in a boarding house, 120 square feet, noisy neighbors, shared kitchen with a greasy stove, cold faucet that ran rusty water. But it was better than the shelter. We had our own key, and for the first time, I locked the door behind me and said, "This is our home now." Sarah didn't smile. She just lay on the bed and turned to face the wall. I looked at her and felt 2 forces fighting inside me, love and pain. I'd pulled her out of hell, but it seemed I'd taken everything else from her. School, friends, comfort, future. I lived on edge. Every dollar counted. Every day was a struggle. Once I didn't have enough money even for milk. We ate bread with butter and warm tap water, but I still said, "Everything will work out. The main thing is we're together." Inside, I barely believed it myself. Sarah started shutting down, became rougher, sharper. I tried to hug her. She pulled away. "You don't understand what I lost. You saved me, but now I have nothing," she shouted once. I didn't answer because maybe it was the truth. 10 years passed. 10 long, exhausting years when we were close, but seemed to be on different shores. I continued working at the tailor shop, now permanently, and sometimes took work home. The old machine squeaked with every stitch, but I sewed until night because it was the only way to provide us with some existence. Sarah went to a nearby school, then to community college. She had new notebooks, used textbooks, and zero desire to connect with me. She came home, threw her backpack down, and locked herself in the room. I knocked. "Sarah, eat something. I made soup." "Don't want any. Leave me alone." I understood. She hated this city, these streets, this boarding house with the dirty kitchen and neighbors who yelled at each other through thin walls. She blamed me for taking her away from what she remembered as a normal life. She couldn't see that going back was worse than hell. I couldn't explain this to her in a way she'd understand. Because when you're young, everything seems black and white. But when you're a mother, the whole world is shades of pain. Our conversations turned into accusations. "You took me away from friends, from school, from normal life," she screamed. "I saved your life," I replied. "Why, if this life is now emptiness?" And then I fell silent because she had tears in her eyes, and I had guilt, heavy, sticky, eternal. Sometimes I caught her look full of hatred, for me, for life, for herself. I didn't know what to do. I only knew I was losing her. Day by day, like sand through fingers. I tried. I did everything I could. bought her a cheap jacket, tried to save on lunches, to give her an old cassette player for her birthday. She nodded, said thank you, and went back to silence. By the time Sarah turned 22, she'd moved out. Got a job at a diner, rented a studio apartment across town. We barely spoke. Sometimes she'd call on holidays, short conversations that hurt more than silence. I no longer felt I had a daughter. There was a young woman somewhere in the city who carried my last name but wanted nothing to do with me. And there was me, an aging woman, tired, with a bad back, but continuing to work because that's all I knew how to do. I wasn't looking for love. After Robert, I thought that feeling had died in me forever, that my heart had become like an old closet nobody looks into, dusty, closed, abandoned. But fate is a strange thing. It loves to test us where we no longer expect anything. At the factory where I worked, a new face appeared. David. He came as a floor supervisor, quiet, attentive, with kind eyes and a deep scar on his cheek. Nobody knew where he was from. He didn't tell, just worked, nodded politely, and left before everyone else. A man about 55, with a voice warm like tea with honey. He first noticed me when I dropped a box of thread spools. He came over, helped me collect them, and suddenly said, "Your hands, they show both pain and strength. You've been through a lot, haven't you?" I froze. Such things aren't usually said to strangers. But he looked and added, "Sorry, it's just that." I recognized the look. I have it too, and showed palms with calluses and old burn marks. We nodded to each other silently, and that was the beginning. He started helping quietly, bringing tea, offering to cover for me on difficult days. Never intruded, never asked personal questions, never imposed, just was there, like a warm blanket on shoulders on a cold morning. Didn't let him closer for a long time. I was afraid. I still heard Robert's voice in my head. "You're worth nothing." But David was different. He didn't rush, didn't demand, just looked and waited. One day when I stayed late at work, he walked out with me. We walked down the street, snow crunching under our feet, and suddenly he said, "Do you have someone waiting for you at home?" I answered honestly, "Just my sewing machine and exhaustion." He nodded. "And I only have loneliness and old photographs. Maybe we don't have to be alone." Slowly, no pressure. Those words melted the ice in me that I thought was permanent. I didn't bring him home right away. First we just walked, drank coffee, told each other stories. I learned he'd lost his wife to cancer 8 years ago, raised a son alone, but the son moved to Seattle and rarely called. David was also broken but not bitter. In his pain was quiet sadness, not rage. For the first time in years, I started feeling alive. David wasn't perfect, but he was real and gentle. And when he held my hand, I didn't flinch. After 6 months of careful courtship, I finally introduced him to Sarah. She'd started visiting occasionally, brief, tense visits where we tried to pretend everything was normal. Sarah was 23 then, working at the diner, sharing an apartment with another girl. When I told her about David, her face hardened. "Are you serious, Mom? At your age?" "I'm not dead yet, Sarah. But you're being naive again, just like with Dad." "David isn't your father." She laughed bitterly. "They never are until they are." When David first came to dinner, Sarah was polite but cold. She answered his questions with one-word responses, excused herself early. But something strange started happening. Over the next few months, Sarah began visiting more often, suddenly interested in when David would be there, asking about his work, his past, even offering to cook sometimes when he came over. At first I was thrilled. Finally my daughter was making an effort. David was charmed by her attention. "You have a wonderful daughter, Margaret. She's so thoughtful, asking about my late wife, wanting to hear stories about my son." "Yes," I said. feeling something I couldn't name nagging at me. She can be very focused when she wants something. David laughed. She just wants to make sure I'm good enough for her mother. It's sweet. But there was something in Sarah's eyes when she looked at David. Something calculating. The smile was too perfect, the interest too sudden. I knew my daughter, and this felt like a performance. One evening, I came home early from work. David's car was in the parking lot. He'd said he might stop by to fix my leaky faucet. I climbed the stairs to our floor, keys ready. As I approached the door, I heard voices from inside, low, intimate. Sarah's laugh, not the sharp, defensive one she used with me, but something softer, more seductive. My hand froze on the doorknob. I stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds, listening to my daughter's voice mixing with David's, and something cold settled in my stomach. I opened the door loudly, calling out, "I'm home!" They were sitting at the kitchen table, papers spread between them. David looked up with a smile. "Margaret, I was just showing Sarah some photos of my son." Sarah didn't look at me. "Hi, Mom, I was just leaving." But there was something in the air, a tension, a guilty energy that made my skin crawl. Over the next weeks, I watched more carefully. The way Sarah touched David's arm when she laughed. How she always found excuses to be there when he visited. The way she dressed differently, softer, more feminine, when she knew he was coming. And David was changing too. More nervous, around me, distracted. Sometimes I'd catch him looking at Sarah with an expression I couldn't read. The truth hit me on a Thursday evening in November. I told David I had to work late, but the job got canceled. I came home to find Sarah's coat on the chair and David's shoes by the door. This time I didn't call out. I moved quietly through the apartment, following the sound of voices from my bedroom. The door was slightly open. I could see them sitting on my bed, too close, David's hand on Sarah's knee, her head on his shoulder. "She doesn't understand you." "Like I do," Sarah was saying. "She's been broken for so long. She doesn't know how to really love anymore." "I care about your mother," David replied, but his voice was uncertain. "Do you? Or do you just feel sorry for her?" I watched my daughter, my 23-year-old daughter, lean closer to this man I'd let into my heart. Watched her kiss him softly. Watched him not pull away. I closed my eyes, stepped back, and went to sit in the kitchen. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, numb, as the last piece of my faith in love crumbled to dust. They came out 20 minutes later, Sarah leaving. Through the back door, David emerging from the bedroom looking guilty and confused. "Margaret, I thought you were working late." I looked at him. This man I'd trusted, this man I'd let heal my broken heart, and saw a stranger. "We need to talk," I said. The conversation that followed was the hardest of my life. David tried to explain, tried to justify, tried to blame his loneliness and Sarah's manipulation. But I stopped him. "Did you love me?" I asked simply. He looked away. "I thought I did." "But Margaret, she makes me feel young, needed, like I matter." "And I made you feel old and broken?" "No, that's not. It's complicated." "No," I said quietly. "It's simple. You chose. Now live with it." I handed him his coat, his keys, everything he'd left in my apartment over the months we'd been together. "Don't come back," I said. "And David? She'll break your heart too. It's what she does." He left without another word. Sarah called the next day. I let it ring. She called again and again. Finally, she came to the apartment, used her old key. "Mom, we need to talk, do we?" I was sitting in my chair, sewing, not looking up. "I know what you think, but it wasn't planned. It just happened." I set down my needle and looked at her, really looked at her. Nothing just happens, Sarah. You chose this. You chose to hurt me in the cruelest way possible. I didn't mean to hurt you. I connected with him. He understands things about life that you don't. What don't I understand about life? Abandonment, betrayal, pain. I wrote the book on all of those. She sat down across from me, tears in her eyes. You don't understand love, Mom. Real love. You stayed with Dad when you should have left earlier. You brought me to this horrible place and expected me to be grateful. You don't know how to choose what's good for you. And sleeping with my boyfriend was good for me? He wasn't right for you. He told me so himself. He said he felt obligated to be with you, that you reminded him of damaged things he wanted to fix. Each word was a knife, but I kept my voice steady. And you thought you were saving him from me. I thought, maybe for once someone could choose me. Not out of duty or guilt, but because they wanted to. I understood then. This wasn't just about David. This was about a lifetime of feeling second to my pain, my fears, my mistakes. Sarah hadn't just betrayed me. She'd been carrying resentment for years, waiting for the perfect way to make me pay. Leave, I said, quietly. Mom, leave, and don't come back. If you wanted to destroy me, you succeeded. If you wanted to show me that love is a lie, you succeeded. Now go live with your choice. She stood up, tears streaming. I never wanted to destroy you. I just wanted you to feel what I felt all those years, what it's like to lose everything. Congratulations, I said, turning back to my sewing. Mission accomplished. The door closed behind her and I was alone, truly alone, for the first time in my 55 years. And in that silence, I made a decision. I would never trust my heart to another person again. Love was a luxury I couldn't afford. 20 years have passed since that day. 20 years of silence, sewing, and solitude. I turned my small apartment into a workshop, became known in the neighborhood as the seamstress who could fix anything. Tears in fabric, broken zippers, worn hems, but not broken hearts. Those, I learned, were beyond repair. I've lived quietly, invisibly. No visitors, no phone calls, no expectations. Some days I don't speak to another soul except to say thank you at the grocery store. Sarah married David 6 months after our confrontation. I heard from a neighbor. They moved to Denver, had a daughter, got divorced 3 years later. Sarah came back to Chicago, but never contacted me. Sometimes I see her at the supermarket, older now, tired looking, with a little girl who has David's eyes. We don't speak. We pretend we don't see each other. It's easier that way. David tried to reach out once, about 5 years ago. A letter saying he was sorry, that he'd made terrible mistakes, that Sarah had manipulated them both. I threw it away without reading it all. Apologies are for people who still have hope. I gave up hope long ago. My 75th birthday came and went without fanfare. I made myself tea, ate a small cake, listened to the radio. It was peaceful. Peace, I've learned, is better than love. Peace doesn't betray you. But last week, something happened that shook my carefully constructed world. There was a knock at my door. Soft, hesitant, I almost didn't answer. But something made me get up, walk to the door, look through the peephole. A young woman stood in the hallway, maybe 25, with familiar eyes and Sarah's chin. Beside her was a little girl, about 4, with curly hair and David's nose. My granddaughter, and my great-granddaughter. I opened the door slowly. Grandmother Margaret. The young woman's voice was uncertain. I'm Emma, Sarah's daughter. This is Lucy, my daughter. Mom told me, she told me about you, about what happened. I was wondering, could we talk? I looked at this girl, this stranger who carried my blood, and felt something I thought was dead stir in my chest. Not hope. I was too old for hope. But maybe curiosity, I suppose. I said, stepping aside. "Come in. This is where I must pause my story for now. I entrusted this piece of my heart to this channel because they give a voice to hidden stories like mine. They help whispers like mine be heard. If my journey resonated with you, if you felt a piece of my pain or my hope, then please don't let it end here. By liking this video and subscribing to this page, you do so much more than just click a button. You breathe life into forgotten stories. You become part of a community that believes our voices matter, that our experiences deserve to be remembered. Your support is the very oxygen that keeps these precious hidden narratives alive. But more than anything, I am so curious to know what you think. Please share your heart with me in the comments below. Tell me, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? And if you truly wish to understand me, to walk further down this path of healing and complicated love, then join me next time. I would be honored to share more from my diary, to unravel the complex, painful, and beautiful tapestry of 3 generations of women. The lived experiences, the silences that said too much, and the unbreakable bonds between a grandmother, a mother, and a daughter. Until we meet again, please take good care of your own heart. With love, Margaret.